During dinner, my father asked if my allowance was enough. I confessed I never got one, and that cold truth shattered our family's darkest secret. My name is Logan. I'm 19 years old and I just started medical school in New York. I'm originally from Texas. My parents live in Dallas, where my father works as a surgeon in a university hospital, and my mother takes care of the home. After finishing high school, I moved to New York 4 months ago to live on my own. I worked hard to get into medical school in July, inspired by my father, but I haven't been able to enjoy university life like others. I wanted to make friends, join clubs, have fun, but money has been very tight. My parents cover the tuition fees, but all other expenses are my responsibility. In addition to attending classes, I've taken jobs as a tutor, event assistant, and bartender. Despite this, I struggle to make ends meet with rent and basic expenses. I often change jobs to adapt to my schedule and generally work weekends. It has been exhausting both mentally and physically. I arrive tired to class, and when I get home late, I struggle to find the energy to study. I'm worried because I might have to repeat the years I'm falling behind in my subjects. I felt anxious and desperate, so I called my mother to ask for financial help, even minimal. My father is almost never home due to his busy schedule, so my mother manages the finances, although my father earns a good living. My mother told me they had no extra money and that paying my tuition was already difficult, so they couldn't send me more. With this response, I felt trapped. When I returned to my apartment that night, I stayed staring at the ceiling for hours. The apartment was small, barely a studio, with a private bathroom in the Queens neighborhood. It wasn't what I had imagined when dreaming of my university life in New York, but it was what I could afford. The walls were covered with moisture stains, and some evenings I had to place containers to collect drops falling from the ceiling. The refrigerator made a strange noise that sometimes woke me up. Many of my classmates lived in modern university residences or shared apartments in better neighborhoods. I had been invited several times to beginning-of-year parties, but I always had to decline because they coincided with my work hours. Sometimes I made up excuses to avoid admitting the truth. I had no money to buy even a few beers to share. The reality of my situation contrasted brutally with my expectations. Growing up in Dallas, my father always talked about the importance of medical education. He told me stories of his university years and how it had been the best time of his life, how he had met my mother at a fraternity party, how he had formed friendships that lasted until today, and how he had learned as much from his professors as from his classmates. University shapes you as a person, Logan, he would tell me. That's where you find yourself, where you define who you will be. But now I wondered how I could find myself when I barely had time to sleep. My daily routine was exhausting. I woke up at 5:30 in the morning to study for 2 hours before going to my first anatomy class at 8 o'clock sharp. After 4 hours of intensive classes, I rushed to tutor high school students for 2 more hours. Then I returned to the university for afternoon classes, which ended at 6 o'clock in the evening several days a week. After classes, I worked as an assistant in the biology laboratory until 9 o'clock in the evening, organizing materials and cleaning equipment. On Thursdays, Fridays, and all weekends, I worked as a bartender in a bar near Times Square, returning home around 3 o'clock in the morning. There were days when I didn't even have time to eat. My lunch consisted of energy bars that I kept in my backpack, and my dinner was whatever I could find on sale at the 24-hour supermarket near my home. Sometimes, when tips were good, I allowed myself to buy a hamburger at the fast food place on the way home. Money had never been an issue in my family. We weren't millionaires, but we lived comfortably in a residential area of Dallas. My father worked many hours, but he received good compensation for it. I never lacked anything materially. I had my own car since I was 16. I went to summer camps. We traveled to tourist destinations during holidays. But now, for the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to count every penny. The first time I saw the price of university textbooks, I nearly fainted. I had to buy 10-year-old, used editions because new ones were impossible to pay for. I shared notes with classmates who could afford updated materials. My mother had always taken care of family finances. It was she who paid the bills, who made sure everything was in order. My father barely knew how much everyday things cost. I realized he probably didn't know what it really cost to live alone in New York. Many of my friends who live alone receive help from their parents, and I envied them, but I decided to continue working. When midterm exams came, I hadn't studied enough, and as expected, I had to take makeup exams. The makeup exams were a disaster. I barely slept the previous week, trying to memorize everything I hadn't been able to learn during the semester. I drank so many cups of coffee that my hands were shaking. On the day of the biochemistry exam, I almost fell asleep on my paper. My mind was foggy, and the questions seemed to be written in another language. I left the room knowing I had failed. I sat on a campus bench, and for the first time since arriving in New York, I cried. These weren't tears of sadness but of frustration. I had worked so hard to get here. I had dreamed of being a doctor since I was a child, and now everything was falling apart before my eyes. That day, I missed my shift at the laboratory. I didn't have the energy to pretend everything was fine. Instead, I walked in Central Park, observing families strolling, couples laughing, students resting under trees with their books. I wondered if I would ever have that tranquility, that normalcy that seemed so distant to me. My phone rang while I was observing the pond. It was my laboratory supervisor. "Logan, where are you? I've been waiting for you for an hour." "I'm sorry. I don't feel well," I replied without completely lying. "Listen, I know you're going through a difficult time with exams, but I need you to be responsible. If you can't commit to this job, I'll have to find someone else. I understand. It won't happen again." But I knew it was an empty promise. Something had to change. I finished the exams in early August. Then the summer break began. I planned to work as much as possible during this break to save everything I could. Summer in New York was stifling. The heat bounced between buildings, creating a concrete oven. My apartment didn't have air conditioning, just an old fan that moved hot air from one side to another. I slept with a damp towel on my body to combat the heat. But the heat was the least of my problems. I had found an additional job in a cafe that opened at 6 o'clock in the morning. So now my routine included 4 hours there, followed by tutoring in the afternoon and the bar in the evening. Some days I worked 16 hours straight. The cafe owner, a Greek named Nikos, would look at me with concern. "Young man, you work too much. It's not healthy." "I need money," I would reply while cleaning tables at full speed. "Can't your parents help you? They're already doing a lot by paying for my university." Nikos didn't insist, but sometimes he would keep cakes that hadn't sold during the day for me or prepare sandwiches for me to take away. These small acts of kindness kept me afloat. One day, as I was serving coffee to a regular customer, an economics professor from Columbia University, I overheard a conversation that marked me. "The system is designed to break students," the professor was saying to his companion. "They're made to believe that higher education is the only path to success, but they were burdened with debts impossible to repay or forced to work to exhaustion. What kind of society does this to its youth?" I reflected on these words all day. Was I part of this system? Was I sacrificing my health, my well-being, my youth for a degree I might not even get if I continued like this? After the holidays, I wanted to focus more on my studies, so I decided to reduce my work hours. This meant I needed to save more, so I also reduced my daily expenses. I started making calculations and keeping a detailed record of each expense. I discovered that a large part of my money was going to public transportation. I decided to buy a used bicycle for $50. It was rusty, and the chain came off every few kilometers, but it allowed me to move around the city without spending on the subway or bus. I also reorganized my food budget. I stopped buying coffee on the street, although Nikos insisted on offering it to me when I passed by the cafe, and I started preparing large pots of rice and beans that lasted me several days. I bought a good quality thermos to carry water instead of buying bottles. For food, I would save with instant noodles, bread, and prepackaged meals on sale, and when I needed to move around the city, I would use my bicycle to avoid transportation expenses. But the sacrifices went beyond the material. The hardest part was seeing my social life vanish. The few friends I had made in class stopped inviting me out after so many refusals. I saw their stories on Instagram, rooftop parties with views of the Manhattan skyline, dinners in trendy restaurants, weekend excursions to Long Island beaches. Meanwhile, I spent my days off washing my clothes by hand to save on laundry, or looking for deals in local supermarkets. I felt increasingly isolated. The loneliness in such a populated city was paradoxical and painful. I walked among crowds, feeling invisible. I served drinks to people who laughed and celebrated while I struggled to keep my eyes open. One evening, as I was returning home after a particularly exhausting shift, I stopped on the Queensboro Bridge. The Manhattan skyline glowed before me, a postcard of opportunities and promises. I wondered how many people were in my situation, struggling silently, pretending everything was fine while collapsing internally. I grew up in a wealthy family, so I never worried about money. I had never imagined living in this kind of poverty. My mother called me every Sunday afternoon. Our conversations had become superficial and brief. I didn't talk to her about my financial problems after that unsuccessful attempt. I didn't want to worry her. Or perhaps I didn't want to confirm that they really couldn't help me. "How are classes going, son?" she would ask enthusiastically. "Good, Mom. I'm learning a lot," I lied. "And have you made friends?" "I have. Your father always says that university friendships are for life." "Yes, we're a very close group." Another lie. "I'm so happy, Logan. I knew you would adapt well. You've always been very independent." That word independent particularly hurt me. It wasn't independence I was experiencing, but abandonment disguised as autonomy. After these calls, I felt worse. The distance between the image I projected and my reality was getting bigger and bigger. After moving, everything was very hectic. But I stayed in touch through messages with a friend from university. Seeing his photos having fun made me sad, noticing how different life could be for other students at the same university. My only close friend was Alex, a classmate who had noticed my constant fatigue. Unlike the others, he hadn't given up on me. He continued to invite me out, although he knew I would probably say no. Alex came from a middle-class family from New Jersey. His parents had bought him a modest car and sent him a monthly allowance that, although not exorbitant, allowed him to live without worries. He shared an apartment with 2 other students in Brooklyn, which considerably reduced his expenses. One Friday afternoon, as we were in the anatomy laboratory, Alex asked me for the umpteenth time, "Do you want to come to a party tonight? It's at a friend's place in Williamsburg. Nothing fancy, just beer and pizza." I was about to give my usual response when I realized that for the first time in weeks I didn't have to work that night. The head bartender at the bar had asked to work overtime, so I'd been given the evening off. "Well, I believe I can today," I replied, surprised by my own words. Alex's face lit up. "Finally! I was beginning to think you were an alien or something." The party was in a small but welcoming apartment. There were about 20 people, mostly medical students and a few from other faculties. At first, I felt uncomfortable, out of place. It had been so long since I had socialized that I had forgotten how to behave in such situations. But after a beer, the only one I would allow myself that night given my budget, I began to relax. I talked with a girl named Sophia, who studied neurology and shared my fascination with the human brain. I laughed at anecdotes of eccentric professors. For a few hours, I felt normal, part of something. When the party ended, Alex offered to drive me home. I can take the subway, I said, mentally calculating the cost of the trip. No way. It's late and it's not safe. Plus, I have my dad's car this weekend. During the ride, Alex put on 80s music and we sang along to songs by Journey and Queen. It was the happiest moment I had had since arriving in New York. You should go out more, Logan, he told me as we entered Queens. Everyone misses you at gatherings. I work a lot, I admitted. I don't have much free time, I know, but you also have to live, right? University isn't just studying and working. For some of us it is, I replied more acidly than I had intended. Alex kept silent for a moment, then asked sincerely, Are you okay, Logan? Really? I thought about lying, about saying everything was perfect as I did with my mother, but I was tired of pretending. No, Alex, I'm not okay. I can barely pay the rent. I work at 3 different places. My grades are nosediving, and I feel like I'm failing at everything. My voice broke at the end of the sentence. Alex stopped the car on a quiet street. Why didn't you tell me? We could have helped you. How? It's not like you could give me money. There are many ways, shared materials, group meals. You could even have moved in with us when Ben left last month. I hadn't considered these options. I had been so focused on my individual struggle that I hadn't contemplated collective solutions. Plus, continued Alex, there are scholarships and aid for students in your situation. Have you looked? I hadn't. The truth is that I barely had time to breathe, let alone search for financial aid options. I'll help you find information, offered Alex. And in the meantime, come have dinner with us when you can. Shannon always cooks too much. Shannon was one of his roommates, a gastronomy student who used her friends as guinea pigs for her culinary experiments. For the first time in months, I felt a small spark of hope. It wasn't much, but it was something. My friends often invited me, but I had to decline because I had neither the time nor the money. I'm driving. Let's go somewhere free, a classmate wrote to me. I work every day, and I'm going home soon for the holidays, I replied. Are you sure you're okay? You always look tired in class. I think you work too much, he told me with concern. I have a physical internship, and I have to cover my expenses. See you when the new cycle begins, I replied. The conversation with Alex made me think. Perhaps there were more alternatives than I had considered. The next day, I passed by the university's financial aid office. There were forms for supplementary scholarships, better paid work-study programs than my current jobs, and even low-interest loans for students in emergency situations. While filling out the forms, I remembered my mother's words, we don't have extra money. Was it possible that they really had financial problems? My father earned a good living as a surgeon, but perhaps there were expenses I wasn't aware of, or perhaps it was simply my mother's way of teaching me independence. That weekend, as I worked at the bar, I found myself looking at customers' faces with more attention. Many were young professionals, probably in their first jobs after university. Some seemed exhausted with dark circles and slumped shoulders, drinking to forget the week. Others were celebrating a success, laughing loudly and ordering rounds. For all of them, I wondered what their lives were like. If some had gone through the same thing as me, if one of them had fainted from exhaustion while studying, if they had counted coins for the subway, if they had felt that knot in the stomach when checking their bank balance before paying rent. The following Tuesday, I received a notification from the university. I had obtained a partial scholarship for students in economic difficulty. It wasn't much, only $500 per month, but for me, it was a fortune. It meant that I could quit one of my jobs, probably the cafe one, and have a few more hours to study and rest. That night, I called my mother to announce the news. That's good, son. I knew you would find a way, she said, as if it had always been part of the plan for me to struggle like this. Mom, you really can't help me with something more? I asked directly. I'm not asking for much, just enough to not have to work at 3 places. There was a long silence before she replied. Logan, your father doesn't know you're going through this. He thinks we're sending you a monthly allowance. Her words hit me like a bucket of cold water. What? But you told me you had no extra money. It's complicated. Explain it to me then, because I'm on the verge of collapse here. My mother sighed deeply. Your father and I are going through a difficult time. He doesn't know it, but we have some debts. I made some investments that didn't work out. Investments? What kind of investments? Stocks, mainly. A friend recommended a few companies that seemed promising, but we lost a lot of money. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. All these months, I had been suffering because of poor financial decisions I didn't even know existed. How much did you lose? Almost all our savings. And I had to borrow to cover some losses. And Dad didn't notice? He never takes care of finances, Logan. He trusts me for that. I don't want to worry him with these problems. He already has enough stress at the hospital. I felt a mixture of anger and confusion. My mother had hidden serious financial problems not only from me but also from my father, and meanwhile, I was sacrificing my health and education. Mom, this can't continue like this. We need to talk to Dad. Please don't do that. I'm working on resolving it. I've sold some jewelry. I'm saving on other expenses. This isn't fair to any of us. This isn't the way to handle family problems. The call ended without resolution. I stayed looking at the phone, feeling that I knew less and less about my own family. After that, I went to my shift at the bar where I work, but shortly after something unexpected happened, I fainted during service. It was a very busy Friday, full of customers. And as I was carrying drinks, I felt dizzy. I don't remember much after that. When I woke up, I was in the hospital. The doctor told me I had fainted from exhaustion and malnutrition. I was administered 4 bags of serum and discharged the same day. The doctor who treated me was a young resident, probably only a few years older than me. He looked at me with a mixture of professional concern and personal empathy. Medical student, right? he asked while checking my vital signs. How do you know? I recognized the signs. Permanent dark circles, multiple jobs, ramen-based diet. I was there not so long ago. He gave me some nutritional recommendations and prescribed vitamins. But before discharging me, he sat next to my bed. Listen, it's not my place to tell you this, but medicine is a long career. If you burn out in the first year, you won't make it to the end. And we need you. We need doctors who understand what it's like to struggle, who have real empathy, not just learned from books. His words deeply touched me. It was the first time someone recognized my struggle and validated it as something that could eventually make me better in my profession. I immediately called my boss at the bar to apologize. He told me that, seeing that I wasn't responding, he had called an ambulance without wasting time and had also contacted my parents. You've taken too many shifts. I've relied on you too much. I'm sorry. I want you to rest for the remainder of the month, he told me. This meant less income for me. A few hours after returning from the hospital, I received a call from my father. His voice seemed agitated, concerned. Logan, your bar boss just called me. Are you okay? Why didn't you tell me you were in the hospital? I just got out, Dad. I didn't want to worry you. Exhaustion and malnutrition? What's going on, son? It was the moment of truth. I could no longer hide my situation, especially after what my mother had revealed to me. Dad, I'm working too much. 3 jobs in addition to university. I don't have time to eat well or sleep enough. 3 jobs? Why do you need 3 jobs? Because with just one, I can't pay the rent and expenses. There was a confused silence at the other end of the line. But your mother and I send you a monthly allowance. That should be enough to cover your basic expenses. My heart skipped a beat, so my mother had not only lied to me but also to him. Dad, I've never received a monthly allowance. The silence that followed was even longer and heavier. I'm going to call your mother, he finally said, and then I'll call you back. I hung up, feeling a mixture of relief and anxiety. The truth was finally coming to light, but I didn't know what consequences this would have for my family. As I took the subway home, I wondered if I should find more students for private lessons. I felt lost. I was supposed to work at the bar the next day, but now I had the day off. I decided to stay in bed and rest. Exhaustion hit me like a wave when I arrived at my apartment. My body, finally released from the adrenaline that had kept it functioning for months, completely gave in. I slept almost 14 hours straight, waking up only to go to the bathroom and drink water. When I finally got up, it was already night. I had several missed calls from Alex and a message from my father. I'm taking a plane to New York tomorrow. We need to talk in person. I didn't know what to think. Was he angry with me for revealing my mother's secret? Or was he worried about my health? The idea of seeing him made me nervous, but also gave me a strange feeling of relief. I would no longer be alone in this ordeal. Checking my phone, I saw a message from my friend that had arrived while I was unconscious. I replied and explained what had happened. Upon learning everything, he decided to come visit me. He brought provisions and cooked spaghetti for me. Alex arrived with several grocery bags. He wasn't just bringing ingredients for spaghetti, but also fruits, vegetables, milk, eggs, bread, and other basic foods that I hadn't seen in my refrigerator for a long time. You didn't have to do that, I said, embarrassed and grateful at the same time. Of course I did. That's what friends are for. While Alex cooked, I told him about my conversation with my father and what I had discovered about the family finances. It sounds like your mother might have a gambling problem, commented Alex, who studied psychology before switching to medicine. The investments could be disguised bets. I hadn't considered this possibility, but it made sense. Would this explain my mother's urgency to keep the secret? Her insistence that she was resolving the problem? If that's the case, it's a disease, Logan, continued Alex while stirring the sauce. These aren't just bad decisions, but a disorder that requires treatment. This perspective made me reconsider my anger toward my mother. If she was really suffering from pathological gambling, she needed professional help, not reproaches. The problem was that my father didn't know either, and now he was traveling to New York, probably confused and angry. When does your father arrive? Asked Alex, serving the spaghetti on chipped plates he had found in my cupboard. Tomorrow afternoon. He told me he took a direct flight from Dallas. Do you want me to be here when he comes? I considered his offer. Alex was a good friend, and his presence could be comforting. But this was a family matter that we needed to resolve among ourselves. Thank you, but I think it's better if I talk to him alone. Alex nodded understandingly. All right, but call me if you need anything. Anything at all. While we ate what he had prepared with such kindness, we talked about the cost of living alone. When I told him that I received no financial help from my parents, he was surprised. So that's why you work so much. But your father is a doctor. Shouldn't you receive some help? I asked my mother, and she told me that with the tuition fees, they're already at their limit. Really? But you're an only child, right? Maybe if you insist again, they could send you something. Mom said not even a little help. It can't be true. It doesn't make any sense. I hate to say this, but maybe your father is sick. Or maybe he's unemployed, suggested Alex. Maybe he lost his job and they didn't want to tell you. I doubt it. I talked to him 3 days ago, and he mentioned a surgery he had performed that day. So, what other explanation could there be? Are they buying a new house, a yacht? Does your father have another family? I almost laughed at the absurdity of this last suggestion, but I held back. The truth is that I didn't know what was happening. It had been months since I had seen my parents in person, and phone calls were brief and superficial. My father worked so much that he was barely home when I called. And my mother, well, now I knew she had lied to me. I don't know, Alex, but I'll find out tomorrow. After Alex left, I stayed to reflect on all the possibilities. Exhaustion and the recent health crisis had sharpened my emotions. I felt betrayed, confused, but also worried about my parents. How bad were things really at home? I spent the night restless, waking up every few hours with a new thought or concern. When the day finally dawned, I got up and cleaned my small apartment as best I could. It was ridiculous to worry about what impression my father would have of my housing given the situation, but I couldn't help it. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I received a message from my father. I just landed. I'm taking a taxi to your address. I'll arrive in about 45 minutes. The next 45 minutes may have been the longest of my life. I paced in the apartment, checking that everything was in order, although there wasn't much to put in order. My possessions were limited to the essentials, a few clothes, medical books, an old laptop, and some basic kitchen utensils. Finally, the doorbell rang. I took a deep breath and opened the door. My father was there with a small travel suitcase. He looked older than I remembered, with new gray hair at the temples and worry lines around his eyes. He looked at me for a moment, assessing me with a doctor's eyes, then hugged me tightly. "Logan, you gave me a terrible scare." I didn't expect this reaction. I had anticipated anger, confusion, maybe even accusations, but not this sincere and overwhelming concern. "I'm fine, Dad. It was just a fainting spell due to fatigue." He let me go and entered the apartment, observing the space with professional attention. "This place is small," he commented, trying to be diplomatic. "It's what I can afford," I replied, feeling a pang of shame, although I knew it wasn't my fault. My father nodded slowly, then sat on my only chair. I sat on the bed. "I talked to your mother," he said directly at length and in detail. His tone was grave, and his gaze intense, and I asked, though I already imagined the answer. "You were right. We never sent you a monthly allowance. Your mother told me that you preferred to be independent, that you had refused our help." I felt anger rising in my throat. "That's not true. I asked her for help several times." My father nodded as if he expected this answer. "I know. I checked our bank accounts, something I should have done a long time ago, and I found irregularities." "What kind of irregularities?" "Large withdrawals, transfers, references to accounts I don't recognize, loans I knew nothing about." "Mom mentioned investments that went wrong?" My father let out a bitter laugh. "They weren't investments, Logan. They were bets. Your mother has had a gambling problem for years. I thought she had overcome it, but it seems she just became better at hiding it." I felt a knot in my stomach. Alex was right. My mother suffered from pathological gambling. "How bad is the situation?" I asked, fearing the answer. My father ran a hand over his face, a gesture I recognized from my childhood. He did it when he was really worried or stressed. "Pretty bad. The house is mortgaged again, although we had already paid it off. There are several personal loans in her name, and the credit cards are maxed out. And my university fees, I pay them directly. At least that's assured." I felt a small relief. At least my education wasn't in danger. "What are we going to do?" I asked, suddenly feeling like a small child looking to his parents to solve a problem. My father looked at me with determination. "First, we're going to resolve your situation. No more multiple jobs, no more famine. I'm going to open an account for you and wire you a monthly allowance. Real. Sufficient for you to live decently and focus on your studies. But the debts, I'll take care of them, and your mother is going to receive professional help this time. This is not negotiable." I nodded, grateful for his firmness and clarity. "And now," he continued, "we're going to look for a better place for you to live. This apartment is not adequate for anyone, let alone a medical student." "It's not that bad," I protested weakly, although I knew he was right. "Logan, you have mold on the walls, and I can hear rats in the corners. It's not healthy." I couldn't contest that. The apartment was cheap for a reason. "And the lease? We'll resolve it. If necessary, I'll pay the penalty for early termination." My father's determination gave me a sense of security that I hadn't felt in months. But there was still a pending issue. "Are you angry with Mom?" My father sighed deeply. "I'm disappointed, worried, and yes, also angry, but mostly I feel guilty for not having been more present, for not having noticed what was happening both at home and with you." His words resonated with me. Despite everything, I couldn't blame him entirely. I had also contributed to the problem by not insisting more, by not being completely honest about my situation. "We both trusted too much," I said. My father nodded with a sad smile. "It seems we did, but now we're talking, and that's what's important." For the next few hours, my father and I developed a plan. We would look for a new apartment, preferably shared with other students to reduce costs. We would establish a reasonable monthly allowance that would allow me to focus on my studies without having to work so many hours. And we would have real and frequent communication, not just superficial calls where we all pretended everything was fine. We also talked about my mother. My father had planned an intervention with an addiction specialist for his return to Dallas. It wouldn't be easy, but it was necessary. In the evening, we went out to dinner at a small Italian restaurant near my apartment. It was the first time in months that I had eaten in an establishment that wasn't fast food. "You know," my father said as we ate, "when I was in medical school, I also went through difficult times." "Really? I always thought you had an ideal university experience." "No one has an ideal experience, Logan. We all struggle in our own way. I worked as an assistant at the morgue to pay for my expenses. It wasn't as glamorous as being a bartender. For the first time in a long time, I really laughed. There's nothing glamorous about being a bartender in a shabby bar in Queens, believe me." My father smiled. "The point is that I understand the struggle. What I don't understand is why you didn't ask me for help directly. I suppose I wanted to prove to you that I could do it alone," I admitted. "Be as good a doctor as you." As independent as you are, Logan, being a doctor is not about enduring unnecessary suffering. It's about learning to ask for help when you need it so you can help others later. His words hit me hard. I had been so focused on proving my worth that I had forgotten the most fundamental lesson of medicine: no one can heal alone. The next day, my father and I visited several shared apartments near the university. We found one that seemed promising, a 3-bedroom apartment in Washington Heights shared with 2 other medical students. The rent was reasonable, divided by 3, and the place was clean and well-maintained. After signing the new contract and paying the deposit, he insisted on doing it. My father accompanied me to my old apartment to get my things. It didn't take long. All my possessions fit into 2 large suitcases. Before leaving for the airport, my father gave me a long and strong hug. "I'm proud of you, Logan. Despite everything, you've shown determination and resilience that many don't have." "Thank you, Dad, and thank you for coming. I will always come when you need me. Just remember to ask me directly next time." I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat. "Say hi to Mom for me," I said, "and tell her I support her, that I understand she's sick and needs help." My father nodded with watery eyes. "I'll tell her. I love you, son. I love you too, Dad." After he left, I settled into my new room. It was small but clean, with a window overlooking a small park. My new roommates Javier and Mina welcomed me warmly. Both were in their 2nd year of medical school and perfectly understood the academic pressure. That evening, as I unpacked my meager possessions, I received a message from Alex. "How did it go with your father? Are you okay?" I replied with a summary of what had happened and a photo of my new room. "Great. Want me to come by tomorrow and bring you a welcome gift?" I smiled as I wrote my response. "Sure, but this time I'm cooking." For the first time since I had arrived in New York, I felt that things might work out. It wouldn't be easy. My mother had a long road to recovery ahead of her, and I had lost time to make up in my studies. But I was no longer alone in this struggle. The following week, I quit my jobs at the cafe, and as a laboratory assistant, keeping only the tutoring job, which was better paid and less physically demanding. With the monthly allowance that my father had started sending me, I could cover my basic expenses without a problem. I also met with an academic counselor to develop a catch-up plan. I would have to take some extra classes and study more intensively, but it was possible to get up to date without repeating the year. A month after my father's visit, I received a call from my mother. Her voice sounded different, clearer, and more focused. "Logan, I'm in a recovery program," she told me without preamble. "I'm going to daily meetings and I have a specialized therapist. I'm very happy, Mom. How do you feel? Like I've woken up from a very long nightmare. I'm ashamed and regret what I put you through. You don't have to apologize." "To me, Mom, I understand that you were sick. Still, I owe you an apology. I put you in danger with my lies and my addiction. You didn't deserve that." We talked for an hour with an honesty that we hadn't had in years. She told me how her gambling problem had started, first as an innocent pastime that gradually transformed into an uncontrollable obsession. How shame and fear had led her to lie more and more, creating a web of deception that had finally trapped her. "Your father has been incredibly understanding," she told me. "He's reorganizing our finances, paying off debts, and still finding time to accompany me to therapy twice a week. Dad is a good man, the best. And you're like him, Logan. You have his strength and compassion." These words meant a lot to me. I had always admired my father, and knowing that my mother saw some of his qualities in me filled me with pride. Over the weeks, my life began to transform. I no longer arrived exhausted to class. I could focus on the lessons and participate in discussions. I started being part of a study group with Alex and other classmates, which not only helped me academically, but also strengthened my social relationships. My new shared apartment turned out to be much better than I had hoped. Javier was an excellent cook, and we took turns preparing meals. Mina organized movie nights on Fridays that quickly became a sacred tradition. We watched both cinema classics and the latest superhero movies, commenting and laughing together. One day, as we were studying in the library, Alex asked me, "Have you thought about what you're going to do during the winter break?" "I guess I'll go to Dallas to see my parents. Why not invite them to come here? They could stay in a hotel downtown and visit the city. It might be good for your mother to have a change of environment." The idea seemed brilliant to me. I called my father that night and proposed the plan. After consulting with my mother's therapist, who thought it would be beneficial for her recovery, they agreed to come to New York for the holidays. The reunion was emotional but comforting. My mother seemed better, healthier, and serene. My father seemed to have regained some of his lost joviality. I took them to visit my new apartment, meet my roommates and Alex, who had become a foundational pillar of my life in New York. One evening, as we dined in a small restaurant in the village, my father brought up a topic that had been on my mind. "Logan, I've been thinking, have you considered the possibility of specializing in psychiatry?" The question surprised me. I had always assumed I would follow in his footsteps in surgery. "Not really. Why?" "Because you've demonstrated an enormous capacity to understand and manage complex emotional situations. What you've experienced this year, the way you handled the situation with your mother, it shows an empathy and strength that would be invaluable in psychiatry." I had never seen things that way. I had always considered my struggle as an obstacle, not as a formative experience that could guide my career. "I'll think about it," I replied honestly. My mother, who had been listening in silence, added, "Whatever specialty you choose, you'll be a great doctor, Logan, because you've already learned the most important lesson. More than healing, it's knowing how to fall and get back up." Her words resonated deeply with me. Despite everything that had happened, or perhaps because of it, I felt that I was on the right path. I had discovered in myself a resilience that I didn't know I possessed. I had formed true friendships and learned to ask for help when I needed it. Life in New York remained a challenge. Medical school hadn't become easier, and there were still times when I felt overwhelmed by the academic load. But I was no longer alone in this struggle. I had my parents, who were now truly present in my life. I had Alex and my new friends. And above all, I had a new perspective on what it truly means to be strong and independent. When the winter holidays ended, and my parents returned to Dallas, I felt a mixture of sadness and optimism. I knew that the path to my mother's complete recovery would be long and that our family relationship would continue to require work and honesty, but I also knew that we had taken the first steps in the right direction. The new semester began with renewed challenges. The classes were more difficult, the exams more complex, but this time, I was prepared. My schedule included time to study, to rest, and to socialize. I was no longer the exhausted ghost who barely survived day to day. One afternoon, as I was studying in the library, Alex passed me a note. "Remember when we met? I thought you were an antisocial snob." How lucky that I was wrong. I smiled reading his words. I had also been wrong about many things. I had confused suffering with strength, isolation with independence, silence with dignity. "Thank you for not giving up on me," I replied. Alex winked at me and returned to his books. At that moment, I remembered the dinner with my father when it all began. His innocent question about my monthly allowance, my honest answer that triggered everything. Sometimes the truth can be painful, but it's always the first step toward healing. Now, as I prepared for another day of classes at medical school, I knew that my path wouldn't be like my father's or anyone else's. It would be my own path, with its own challenges and rewards, and that was okay. In the end, that's what growing up really meant, finding your own path, learning from your falls, and having the courage to ask for help when you need it. And perhaps, just maybe, these lessons would one day make me the kind of doctor who could truly make a difference in others' lives. Every morning, waking up in my new room with sunlight filtering through the window, I reminded myself that I had survived one of the most difficult periods of my life. And if I could overcome that, I could face anything that came after. As my mother had said, I had learned to fall and get back up. And that was perhaps the most precious lesson of all. 1 year later, my mom's in recovery, my dad supports me, and I finally found balance. That's the end of my story. Now I want to ask you, in the end, am I the asshole, or not?